welcome, and thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. On the program today, we thought we would explore something fascinating that most people should really tune into. Well, that tuning in is actually their own bodies. Have you ever thought to yourself that as you actually listen to your body that you can decipher special messages and ways that you can discover how you can identify things such as stuck energy, which can show up through pain and discomfort as well as disease, and also learn how to resolve those issues that are related to those very things? How about unhealed emotional wounds, which are at the root of most physical, mental, and emotional disturbances? Our guest today has a medical degree, having worked for years as a nurse in a variety of healthcare settings, including assisted living, skilled nursing, as well as cardiology and home health. She is also a certified life coach who was also a regular guest on an ABC's affiliates, AM Northwest, as a life transition coach as well. She's also the author of The Hourglass, How to Live as Time Flies By, and is writing a new book called The Healing Matrix. I'd like to welcome to the Beyond 50 radio program today our guest, Diane Dennis. Diane, thank you for being back here on the program.
Hi, Daniel. Thank you so much.
So exciting always having you here on the Beyond 50 radio program. You bring this vitality and liveliness sometimes, especially with a particular topic that we're talking about today that most people might consider to be, well, isn't that metaphysical stuff? And it's like, no, it's very, 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 very well grounded, actually.
Yes, definitely. I think we separate, as we do, especially in this culture, separate out things into compartments, one or the other. It either has to be rooted in the Western traditional scientific methods, or it's Eastern and woo-woo. And I think integrating all of what we have an opportunity to learn about and bring into ourselves and our lives is very well served.
You know, I know that over the years of producing this program here, I've talked with many fascinating guests over the years, you certainly being one of those. And it's really fascinating when people pass this off and they kind of put science in the way. It's always science that seems to have to prove anything. And it's like, well, where do you think science starts in the first place? It starts with a hunch, an idea, doesn't it? And then you explore it through a particular method that gives you a consistency, and that's called scientific discovery. Now, let's go ahead and let's talk about, for instance, listening to our bodies. Now, I know this question from what I've experienced through many guests in many years, but let's go ahead and put it into a grounded perspective because you have a lot of really good, solid background in this area. Do our bodies actually inform us?
Yes. In fact, I want to just hop back just a little bit about what you said because there's a fascinating story about when you mentioned, we have to prove it scientifically. Well, Candace Pert, a PhD, award-winning scientist, who wrote The Molecules of, just escaped me, memory.
That happens. Our body's informing us.
Anyway, The Molecules of Emotion, I think that's it. But anyway, she did scientifically prove that we have more receptors, emotional receptors, in our gut than we do in our brain. So with that knowledge and that research that I did, it leads me to your first question, which is, yes, our bodies definitely can inform us if we learn the signals and the language. Okay.
So now people are thinking to themselves, well, what is the body's language? What is it telling us? I mean, most people would think, well, there's pain, but there's a lot more to it than that.
Yes. Well, our bodies, we don't listen or pay attention to our bodies kind of like our cars. When they break down or something hurts, it gets our attention, and it's really an annoyance. Like, oh, God, now I have to go take care of this problem.
Right.
Or if we get if we're tired, we try and barrel through it. Drink caffeinated drinks. So really, our bodies are our operating system, and without our bodies, we obviously would not have life. So therefore, it bodes us well to pay attention to what our body's telling us. So aside from the obvious, when something hurts, it gets our attention. We have different messages that our bodies will give us. Like one is, do you ever get those goosebumps?
Absolutely. I know there are times when I describe something to someone and you can feel the excitement inside of you as you're talking about it, and all of a sudden you just feel that happen, and it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, I love that when that happens, because when that happens, when you're having those goosebump moments or the hair raises on the back of your neck, it really is your higher self integrating with your body and using the body as the messenger. Isn't that beautiful?
It is. I remember, in fact, just recently I was talking with a couple who is in a few weeks getting married, and they had described to me how they were going to Ireland to get married. And I said, do you have Netflix? And they said, yes, we do. And I said, there's a woman on there you've got to listen to. Lorena McKenna is her name, and she has Night at the Alhambra. They said, well, who's that? And I said, well, she actually does real Celtic music. It isn't, Celtic voices or women's Celtic voices like you typically see on, television, but this is one who really explores what Celts really are. And as I was describing, I said, you really need to see her. And even now as I talk about it, I can just feel that happening.
Wow.
And they were like, yeah, we'll really check that out. I said, trust me, you're going to love this woman, and it'll really set the mood for you going to Ireland, especially since you're getting married there. So.
Yeah. Isn't that wonderful? It's when something resonates with you on a really deep level, then your body gives you that affirmation, that boost of, yes, whether it's goosebumps or just kind of flutters or just a high level of energy. Your body is saying, yes, go for it. Good. It's good to go.
Now, what are some of the other messages, too? I mean, we talked about, obviously, pain. There's goosebumps. What other things?
Okay, so we can learn to ask our body questions. I think of our body in terms of, now this is going to sound strange at first, but you know how, like a child, I think of our bodies as a child. Our bodies don't have egos. So they don't have an agenda other than just to function. And we sometimes sabotage that functioning by our own lifestyles. And so if you ask, I was watching a lady giving a talk the other day, and it just blew me away. She said that she was having knee pain, and she didn't really have any reason for it. She didn't remember falling or twisting her knee or ever having any problem with her knee. It just hurt. And so she looked down and she gently touched her knee and she said, what are you trying to tell me? And she just got really quiet, and she got this message in her head that said, you're not finished grieving from the loss of your mom. And you think, well, that's crazy. That would never work for me. But I've put this into practice, and I honestly, it is anything else you have to practice. And I gently touch those places in my body that are distressed, and I just sit with it and ask for healing. And it's really helpful. It does work. And then also listening, we get those little aches and pains that are annoyances, and we ignore them till they're big. Try to make sure you pick up on the smallest of sensations, because that's really your body trying to tell you something. And if you ignore it, it'll keep growing and getting bigger and could possibly turn into something. And so that's a time to really reflect and say, why is this happening? There's always an answer to the why.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. I was curious, that as we talk about this and people may not be aware of body messages, what they might be able to do to start, the process of getting them.
So I would say that a really good practice is to get really quiet. And whether it's at night or early in the morning when there are less distractions around, and make sure that you're not, that electronic devices are not calling your attention, and you're not distracted in all of those ways we usually are throughout our day, and not when you're driving, of course, but just sit and just feel. And you can honestly check in, the chakras. You can check in from, the highest chakra all the way to your feet, and just put your hand on each area and just feel, how does it feel? You'll be able to tell that, oh, this feels a little stuck, or this feels a little heavy. Like, Eckhart Tolle calls it the pain body when he in The Great Earth, or A Great Earth. I'm terrible at thinking of names of books, terrible. But anyway, he calls, this heaviness we hold inside of us, whether it's emotion we haven't expressed or bottled up, physical energy. He calls it that pain body. So all of us are different. We store this congestion, I call it, congested energy, in different places in our bodies. And those need tending to. And, then when you figure out the place or the area, then you can start saying, I wonder what this means. If you don't know, go to a practitioner. Maybe, you like massage or acupuncture or something like that. That's one way to do it. Drinking a lot of water is really, really important. And then lowering, clean eating, basically. If we could just say across the board, clean eating keeps your body light and in tuned enough so that there isn't a disconnect between you being able to check in.
When you, as you were talking about the pain body, one of the things I thought of that is real common in people, and it's something I feel so fortunate in my lifetime I haven't experienced too much of, and that's headaches. Let's talk about that for a minute, because I'll see, in fact, I had a friend of mine for years. She never told me that she was actually having a problem with migraines. And, and I remember having a migraine one time that was actually related to a flu that just came on, like almost immediately, it seemed like. And I thought, how do people live with these things? I was beating my head against the wall. I was going nuts. The pain was so intense. But what about that? Are the headaches, try telling people something specific? Or?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So migraines are a really big message because you can't ignore them. Now, you can medicate them and try and get a lot of people keep functioning somehow. I am highly sensitive, so anything that big would stop me in my tracks. Whereas a lot of people will find different treatments and just keep going through the day. A migraine is basically like your operating system shutting down. It's like stop. You're overstimulated in some way, whether it's like you said, the flu for you, or, some people are highly sensitive to different lighting. Some people are sensitive to foods. Migraines can be triggered from a variety of things. Exhaustion. It basically, your body's telling you, go to a dark room, lay down, don't move. That's basically it. It's shut-off time. And we don't do that usually. We have to go to work. We don't want to lose our job because of a headache, that type of thing. But that's
why you have a headache in the first place. Yeah. You might want to lose that job.
Exactly. The stress, yes. So I was at the bank yesterday, and one of the bankers had just come back from an overseas trip, and she had a cold and a migraine. And I said, what day did you get back? And she said, Sunday. And I said, what day did you come back to work? She said, Monday. Now, she flew halfway around the world. So she's jet-lagged. She's exhausted. She comes back to work. And, of course, she gets a migraine, right?
Right.
And so it's like I said, your body's telling you that it didn't want to come back to work that fast. And, of course, she said, well, I don't have any more vacation time, right?
Right.
So really, we do our bodies a disservice in so many ways by not listening and even moving the wrong way. People have they'll wake up one day and they go, I threw my back up. How did it happen? I don't remember. It's been, years of overuse or bending wrong, that sort of thing. And it may be manifested in little aches and pains, but we really didn't pick it up until, wow, I got my attention now. But now, it's deeper and it's a bigger problem to resolve. So catching things earlier is always the best and easiest to resolve.
Right. And I was just thinking, too, is that as I've also visited your website, Diane TV, I believe it is .com, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And I remember catching a piece of your blog talking about anger. And when you think about, like, for instance, this new presidential election cycle we've just been through, and certainly in Portland, Oregon, we were the place was showcased all over the world about all the anti-Trump marches, things like that.
Yeah.
And I think to myself, for several years I had been studying things on subliminal messaging and advertising and persuasion, and realizing what really happens to get people motivated toward their buying behavior. And as you come to some interesting conclusions as you study about this and propaganda and so forth, and you realize advertising is set up in a way to induce anxiety so that you'll move forth with the action that says, do this so that you can relieve that anxiety.
Absolutely.
And as I was studying this, it became really apparent about fast food. Just think about how anxious or the kind of stress it is just simply driving down the street to get somewhere. Mm-hmm. And that when you pull into one of these fast food places, it's really not because you're hungry, it's because you're soothing anxiety within yourself. Mm-hmm. Now, you start getting in that habit, and the next thing you know, fast food starts causing your body to get into a more deeper perpetual state of anxiety simply because of what you're eating. Now, let's talk about that, for instance. You know, what we eat or drink, how does that affect our ability to be able to communicate with our bodies?
Yes. Well, it makes it more difficult. It makes us basically disconnect. So you said a lot of really important things in there. First thing about self-soothing with food, if we don't feel our feelings, we're either going to stuff them, and we're literally stuffing them when we're using food as the antidote for anxiety. And that's not a good solution. It's just like if our car, I love the car analogy to our bodies because it's so similar in a way. You know, every time your car started to act up, if you put more gas in it, you know what I mean, or you put more water in it, it just would be overflowing in it, what we need to do is we need to do that thing that is appropriate for our needs, for our deepest needs. So if we're stressed out, we should really find out why are we anxious, what's the source of it. And you also talked about yes, eating lighter foods is best, clean eating, organic, no foods without additives, preservatives, and pesticides, chemicals is the ideal way to eat. And I know a lot of people don't feel that they can do it, but it's really easy to get in the habit every Sunday of prepping your food, baking a bunch of, protein, chicken, beans, whatever you eat, and then get all your greens and take your food with you as you go. I eat in the car, but it's my own food that I brought. So, but you talked about anger, and I really want to circle back to that because that's a huge one. People will store, and this is common, certain feelings or emotions get stored in certain parts of your body, and they say that anger goes to the liver and also the cardiovascular system. And you see, the stereotypical cartoons of the blustery executive male in his corporate job having a heart attack, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
So anger is stored. Yeah, so I mentioned the liver, but I want to tell you something that happened that I personally experienced in the last 2 years since Trump became president. I had two friends. Of course, yes, I'm in Portland, Oregon. I had two friends, male friends, and they were livid about the outcome of the election. I told both of them they don't know each other at separate times. I sat with them and I said, this anger is killing you. And I said that metaphorically. I didn't mean literally, physically right now, But I'm going to tell you, one of them ended up with atrial flutter, which is a cardiac electrical conduction problem, and had to go in to have cardioversion to save his life. The other one had a stroke. I kid you not. And I'm watching this unfold. My eyes are like, if I needed any affirmation that what I'm talking about is true, there it is right there. And I know someone else who was highly angry and hid her anger by being overly nice. It was a mask. I could see the mask. I did some coaching with her. I couldn't break through to her. She ended up with liver cancer, and she died.
Oh, wow.
So honestly, I'm not trying to frighten people, but we really need to get to the bottom of our emotions. And it's hard to do because our emotions, our unconscious emotions, get trapped and our ego is the operating system of our unhealed emotions, and that's the root of all the beginning of any sort of disease or disorder or discomfort. And that's my sweet spot of helping coach people through that so that they can, be free of this heaviness that will manifest in a variety of different ways. Like you said, eating, compulsions and addictions, that's just a way of covering up that unhealed wound that wants to be surfaced.
And I found it also fascinating when I was back and I was studying a lot about this, especially the subliminal persuasion part of things and realizing how that's all around us. You start really becoming aware of how much advertising is really around us. It's on cars, it's on shirts. I understand they're even going to start paying people to tattoo a message on their body. I guess it's even getting that crazy. But what was really fascinating for me, though, is I became aware of all this. And it's usually awareness is the first step, such as what we're talking about here today. Your message, do you have a pain in your elbow? Okay, that's the first thing. You're aware of it. Now, as you said, settle down in a quiet place and learn to listen to see what is it telling you.
Mm-hmm.
And what I noticed was, as I would drive down the street now, and I would pass by these fast food places, and I might feel a sense that, I'm feeling hungry. Maybe I'll pull in and I'll get myself a burger. I realized I started asking myself the question, but am I truly hungry?
Yeah.
And as I did that, it was sort of like my body was saying, no, I'm not really all that hungry. You really don't want that in the first place. It doesn't mean that I avoid these places now, but I was aware that, I'm not hungry. I could sit in a McDonald's, for instance. Everybody around me could be eating, and I might just have a glass of water, and I'm okay with that. And it was amazing how empowered that was.
Yes. Well, a lot of us don't know the difference between being hungry and being thirsty, and most of us are dehydrated. So a really good thing to do, if I'm sort of hungry at an odd time during the day when I've had my meals or whatever, then I'll drink a glass of water and see if I'm still hungry. And oftentimes I'm not. It was just my body, telling me I'm thirsty, but it's really hard to tell the difference sometimes. And advertising, you are so correct. They know what triggers us most is fear. Fear is the common denominator of how to motivate us. And so you're right. They put in things that you're right. That language and messaging and images, that will make us afraid. That's why, they spend billions of the advertisers, the companies spend billions of dollars on pharmaceuticals, telling you, do you have a headache? You need this, So, you don't, or coming up with a disorder that you didn't even know you had, but it sounds like you could have it,
Well, what's funny about that, and I've even talked about this over the years, is we've had people in the pharmaceutical industry that are out blowing the whistle on them now.
Yeah.
And it's really funny because I said, why don't people just apply a reason when they see this commercial that creates this idea that you might have something, and these might be the symptoms you could be having, and then they tell you about the thing that's supposed to help you with that, but yet look at all the side effects you could possibly get from it. It's like, you might as well just die. So you've created my problem, you've given me the solution, but then that becomes worse than the problem you thought you were giving me in the first place.
And I think that's from decades of us being dependent on the medical system to save us. So, what drives us is fear, and then the magical thinking that well, they wouldn't give us something so bad that we would get all those side effects. They just legally have to mention that we could, right?
Right.
So, it's a combination of fear, dependency, and magical thinking.
There you go. That genie's out of the bottle, and it's making things even worse for us than we had in the first place. But you bring up something that really is important for the listeners to know, and that is, let's take a look at doctors, how we tend to place so much belief in what they do just because they went out and became educated about what the body is and all of its parts. But the fact is, we really know more about ourselves than a doctor does. And that's what we're talking about here, is how to learn to be, even, what was it, Hippocrates was, doctor, heal thyself, which is literally saying, you can do this. They just have a little more education. But look, why don't you go do your homework and find out about this?
Yeah. I think the key is helping yourself before you need medical intervention. Because if if we're not listening and our body is going haywire, and one day we wake up and we can't move, or we have something really severe, then we're going to need to get medical intervention. We can't, talk our bodies out of it if it's already manifested into the heaviness of our physical being. So I'm really talking about the nuances of listening and fine-tuning our bodies and doing the appropriate things and healing our emotional wounds. That's a biggie. That's a huge one. And if we have to, if it gets to the point where we haven't done that, or, we're in an accident or something, then medical intervention is appropriate. But, after being a nurse for so many years and watching the dynamics and the roles that we play as medical professionals and as patients, the medical professionals are the rescuers, and the patients are the victims. They're the victims that need to be need to be rescued. The doctor in the white coat, isn't it just perfect?
Right, exactly. And the question is, why do you think you need to be fixed in the first place?
Yeah.
What was broken about you in the first place? I'm curious, too, because you do this so well. Are there other ways that body messages come through? For instance, one of the ways I would imagine, because I've been a dreamer, it seems like I can't get that to shut off when I go to sleep, is, do messages come through in dreams? Because I know personally I've experienced this, like parts of my body, actual organs, where I have dreams about that. And realize, okay, what's going on here, And
isn't that lovely? I'm the same way, and aren't we lucky?
Yeah, but let's talk about that. Is that something that's very real?
So yes, if you've tapped into your intuition, the dreams are your unconscious mind bringing things forward that you didn't tap into while you were awake. However, you have to be careful. And because my dreams, everything I dream about, whether it's my physical state or anything else, it's an exaggeration of it. Do you see what I'm saying?
Right.
So like, let's say I scrape my knee. I might dream that my knee is like in really bad shape or something. So you the metaphor translation is individual for each person. So I wouldn't be necessarily totally, go into fear if you have a dream, because it also could be a metaphor for something else, right? But so if you do want to explore that, I think a good way to do that is just to ask before you go to sleep. If I need to know anything or do anything to help my body, please let me know what it is. Like if you're having a lot of gut problems, it could be fear. Maybe there's something unconscious you're afraid of, and you just haven't tapped into it yet. So, the body is a great messenger if we just learn that the body is an expression of our emotional state. So this is how I want to describe and explain it. Let's say I'm afraid of something, but I really don't want to admit I'm afraid of something. Who wants to admit fear? Sure. I don't even want to admit it to myself.
Mm-hmm.
So,
especially in a day and age of heroes.
Yes, exactly. And men, men are not allowed to express that emotion as freely as women do in this culture without ridicule or bullying or whatever. So let's say I'm hiding my fear. But then I start to get these terrible stomach problems, and I think, oh, no. And then I take antacids because I think, well, although, I got to keep going. This isn't that bad. And really, taking antacids is compounding the problem physically, number one. Number two, that fear isn't going to go anywhere until I bring it forward and I sit down with it and say, what are you afraid of, and then work through the fear. So every emotion that you have in your body, this is why it's so important to listen to your body. Your body will have an immediate and complementary, and I don't mean that in a complementary good way, just a matching hormonal response that will affect all of your cells and organs. So let's say I'm afraid and I don't know it. What does my body produce? Adrenaline. What does that do? That is going to put out a whole bunch of adrenaline into my bloodstream, and it's going to tax or tire my adrenal glands, and it's going to manifest in these physical things that I'm talking about, being tired or being avoidant or, wanting to self-soothe because I have this underlying anxiety that people call stress. So I think, well, if I just have a glass of wine or, if I, have that burger or whatever, oh, I feel better. Well, you feel better in the moment, but now you're adding a new problem. So always ask your body, how are you feeling? Which means, how am I feeling? Which means, what's my emotional state that I'm not even aware of?
Huh, that's interesting.
Yeah, that was another really big breakthrough with Dr. Candace Pert and her book, The Molecules of Emotion. She's in all of those metaphysical movies you might see, What the Bleep Do We Know? And there's a couple, the state People versus the State of Illusion. Have you seen that movie? That's great.
No, that one I haven't heard of.
Oh, God, yeah, I bought it. It was a very small release in theaters. It's just absolutely mind-blowing. But anyway, so that your body is your messenger to tell you that which is stuck in your unconscious field.
Oh, okay. And as I was thinking about that, what you were just talking about, a movie did come to mind, and this becomes a very interesting question here. One of my favorite movies in the past, say, 10 years has been $1 Million Baby. Okay. And that's the story starring Hilary Swank and Clint Eastwood, where she wants to become world champion boxer. She comes from nowhere, considers herself, to be white trash, that sort of thing. But that's something she loves to do. Mm-hmm. So in one of the matches, it's actually one of her first matches that she's fighting in, she realizes this, girl is really sticking it to her. And you have Morgan Freeman in the background doing a lot of the narration, sort of. He's telling the story behind the scenes as he's also in the movie as well. And he says, sometimes the body knows what the mind doesn't know. Mm-hmm. Get out of the way here. You obviously don't know what you're doing. And pretty soon, as Clint Eastwood steps in, he's the manager of Hilary Swank's character, he's basically saying, you're thinking too much. This is what you need to do. And the body just, boom. And it's amazing how that happens. Like I found, for instance, as I got older, that it seems my reflexes are a lot faster than they were when I was a kid.
Wow.
Just reacting to stuff like boom, catching stuff like it's just pretty wild. And I know it's my body doing that, because by the time you think, oh, I need to catch that, it's probably already dropped. Or by the time I need to move out of the way from this barreling truck, for instance, if I think that, I'm going to be in a lot of trouble, but it just happens. So let's talk about how the body might just be a lot more intelligent than our minds are. Yeah,
well, you have really well-trained reflexes. How about that?
It could be, I guess.
Yeah, so we go through life and we have experiences, and I live on the river and do a lot of boating, and, there's a lot of movement. So I got really good at catching things, too, and it applies really well in the kitchen.
Absolutely.
That bowl's going to break in a million pieces, and you just catch it midair. So there is this mind-body connection, and it's very, well ingrained, and you see it with your reflexes, how it becomes automatic. It's like, wow, I didn't even plan that. Wasn't that cool? So, yeah, and think about just that. Think about all the other ways we could train ourselves, right?
Sure.
That we just kind of let the world take care of things for us. But yeah, so we have our reflexes, and we have our intuition, and if we can integrate all of these things really closely together, and get the heavy emotions that are stuck healed, and do all the other things we talked about, then you have the possibility of living an optimum life with some pretty good healthy years, right?
Right. Exciting years.
Yeah.
Definitely. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, the possibilities are endless, and neuroscience is just making headways into how the brain operates, and all the different ways we're not even using it, and the connection between our brain and our bodies, of course, is just now, thank goodness, it's scientifically proven, so we don't have to call that woo-woo anymore. But I think as we, more and more integrative medicine is coming along, more and more coaching for healing wounds is happening. I am, clearly that's what I do, and love that, to help people, because I see them shift in a very short amount of time, where they shift from not knowing. And this is another thing. If you want something in life but you can't seem to get it, no matter what you try, everyone has that one thing, right?
Right.
Whether it's enough money, or a relationship, or the career, or whatever it is, there's always at least one thing. I feel special because I've got at least two.
There you go.
that I couldn't seem to get to. Mm-hmm. So I did this process that I help other people through. And the reason you're not getting what you want is because there's an unconscious belief that is not in accordance with what you want. So you have your higher self and your conscious mind going around saying, well, I want this one thing. But your unconscious belief, which is all wrapped up in that unhealed wound that your ego is controlling, doesn't want that to happen. And I won't go into it now. It's quite detailed. I don't know if we have enough time. But when I put those two things together for people, there's like light bulb moments, like, oh my gosh. And even if it is, a physical problem they can't seem to get over or can't seem to heal from, we go back and find the unhealed belief, and that's a wound that was created, tied to that is tied to our core being, like our feelings about ourselves. Does that make sense?
Absolutely it does. In fact, when you go back to what I was describing earlier about studying, subliminal messaging and advertising and all that, you become aware of, okay, so this industry has really worked very hard at understanding how people are motivated. And in relation to that, you can simply get to a point to say, okay, now I can learn to listen to myself. I can listen to that conversation in my head. I can realize that maybe this ache in my knee, as you were describing earlier, I become more inquisitive about these things.
Yeah.
For instance, you might have this passing thought with a coworker, for those of you who are out there working in jobs that maybe you don't like, and all of a sudden a stressful thought comes along, well, this person is such a, let's say, a bitch or whatever it may be. Mm-hmm. Then you can, I find that over the last couple of years I jump into an inquiry that says, well, how do you know that's true?
Right.
And it's amazing the answers you get. Like, well, I really don't. But how we buy what we think is reality.
Yeah, exactly.
And when we do and we start replaying that loop, then you can see how you start stressing the body because you're definitely going in a different direction. Your body says, look, this is not your true nature here, and I'm going to make sure to wake you up to realize that. And if you don't, it's going to get a lot worse. Exactly.
So your higher self is asking for that belief that's tied to an unhealed wound to be healed. The belief becomes the belief we think is truth when it really is nothing more than an opinion. And we build a whole story around the belief. and that is called our life.
I was also thinking too, Diane, here's a funny one too. I love this particular phrase people love throwing around, and that is, well, that's just common sense. And I had a guest on the program, and it cracked me up when he said this, and he says, common sense is nothing but a list of biases we were raised with.
Exactly. Oh, my gosh. And now we're going to circle back to the election that, some of my friends got very sick from just unrelenting anger, is that now, we're so, with the electronic devices being our main source of all information, advertisers, as you say, and headlines know how to trick us into becoming motivated to click on it, which is pay per play, so lots of money. But it's just like we're monkeys, and we do it because, that's how we're wired, and they know it, but we don't really understand what we're doing. But what's happening is it's creating dogma on either side, more, to a point where the beliefs are so ingrained that you search for evidence to support the belief, and then it becomes even more ingrained. It's self-perpetuating, and all it does is create polarization and feeling isolated in a crowded world.
And going back to the election, as I was up in Portland when Donald Trump was elected president and seeing all these marches, and apparently somebody had went out there, several people, to find out, and I don't know how true this is, but I know in my experience in actually asking people who were, this Trump guy, this country, this and that, and they were a lot of younger people. They discovered that more than 70% of these people that were out there not only marching or, the anti-Trump rallies in downtown Portland, but also destroying property out there, which I knew that was only a matter of time before those monkeys started going in there and doing those stupid things. But they found out that more than 70% of these people didn't actually vote. So they're complaining about an outcome that they had no specific action toward.
Yeah, well, that'll kind of store up in your body, won't it?
It sure will, and I remember asking people who were, talking about Trump in a bad way, well, what do you really know about Donald Trump specifically? Did you vote? How much action did you take in the political process since you were legally allowed to? And most of the time I would get very, well, I really wasn't. Then what are you complaining about? Mm-hmm. And how does his election, or being elected, how does that actually affect your life as it is right now here in this moment?
Right. And
you'd be amazed when you ask just simple questions like that how lost people really are.
Yeah. Well, and then you see on Facebook every day people are saying, and they'll say something, very salacious, and then they'll say, and why aren't we all in the streets marching? Or why don't we change this? Well, because you don't have to, because your outlet's Facebook.
Exactly. Yeah, the patriots out there. Well, at least I'm letting you be aware of the problem. No, you're actually creating a problem that was really yours to begin with.
Yeah, and I'm poking fun at us, really, but the implications are pretty serious when we just bring it back home to each of us individually and what's happening to us. And what is this good for us? Or is our way of thinking and our way of acting and behaving working to our benefit? Or are we just on this slippery slope of going along the way everyone else is and looking at the big, shiny, bright objects to opinionate about? So, I think we need to shake up, and I think we need to shake ourselves up, basically, because it starts with each of us individually on a personal level.
So what it comes down to for the listeners out there, Diane is someone that you can connect with that gets you to learn how to begin letting your higher self do the thinking for you for your best personal interest. Would that be an accurate way to say that?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Come on, own it. I need you to own this.
Well, what I help people do is the most obvious way I help people is they are just sick and tired of being of not getting what they want, of not having the life that they want, and they don't understand why. And we poke around and we find it, and then we work on healing protocols. And that's what my book is, wanting to be born so bad it's having labor pains.
There you
go. But that's what I'll have in it, is the protocols and the principles of healing this piece that can get you to the place where you want to be. And I did it for myself, so I know it works. So yeah, that's kind of a general way to say it. And I did get a URL for people to remember easier, is sacredhealingcoach.com, and there I give 50% off to all your listeners because I want to help as many people as I can, and it's a process, and I help guide people along the way of how to do that, which I've done, and am happy to say it works.
Absolutely. And it's very exciting, too, for people out there listening to think, there is a way that you can begin reclaiming your life, and that you don't have to live this way where you're beginning to feel the aches and pains or the headaches, things we were talking about earlier, and then start to turn to, for instance, pills, that you begin becoming more empowered. It just, when you think about how we spend the quarter of our lives going to school and teachers telling us who we're supposed to be, the kind of behaviors we're supposed to have, how we get, for instance, approval and how we get disapproval. We take that into our 20s, and we do the very same thing. And then one day you wake up and say, why have I been doing things the way people have been telling me to do them, the way they should be done? And I don't feel happier, and I don't feel, in fact, I just had a 28-year-old just the other day, kind of in a way whining, but not really. But I remember that same moment when I was about his age. I just thought I'd have more going on in my life by now.
Yeah.
And I said, trust me, what would you really like to do? It was a simple question. He says, well, I'd like to do that. And you could see him light up. And I said, then what steps do you need to take to move you in that direction?
Yeah.
And that's how simple, for instance, in a way, your work is, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So if he were to come to me, and I'd sit down with him, and I would show him how he has an underlying belief tied to his core belief about himself that came from just what you said, Daniel, the way he was raised, the shame-based controlling, you're trying to keep your kids safe, but you tell them every which way that they don't measure up,
Right.
And you don't even need to say it out loud. It's just, so we have these things. And so I would find his core belief about himself that his ego is preventing him from going for that, to that thing that he really, really wants, because maybe he's afraid. Let's just say, his parents told him he wasn't good enough. And that's an underlying belief. He doesn't know that's in his belief system. He doesn't know it's in his unconscious. But as long as he doesn't know it and doesn't bring it forward and heal it and change that belief, replace it with a belief that serves him well now, then his ego is going to give him 1.5 million excuses why he can't go after that thing, because of his fear of failure or his fear that that is true. His ego is going to put up some self-sabotaging behaviors in place. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does, definitely. I think we've certainly cleared up all this where people can see there is a sense of science behind what we're talking about here. It isn't out there and groovy and woo-woo, so to speak, that it really, people listening should say, this really just makes a lot of sense. I like to use the word reason. I don't like to use common sense.
Yeah.
It's reasonable, isn't it? And if it isn't, let's find out a way that we can get to that point where it is, that sort of thing. And certainly the step people could take is, what was your website again?
Oh, sacredhealingcoach.com. And if they go to schedule an appointment on my calendar, they type in Sacred Healing, all one word, and that will automatically give them the 50% discount.
Oh, very good. Well, Diane, thank you. It's always a pleasure talking with you.
Thank you. You're just fun. It's like we're two kids in a tree having a fun conversation and learning along the way.
There you go, just like Forrest Gump.
Yeah, right.
Diane, thank you again for being on the Beyond 50 radio program. One more time for the listeners, what is the website? sacredhealingcoach.com. Very good. Thanks again, Diane.
Thank you. You guys have a great day.
Will do.
Okay.
We want to thank you, the listeners out there, for joining us. You can also discover more at beyond50radio.com. That is the number 50. we do encourage you to sign up for our weekly e-newsletter. Keep up to date with what's going on in the world of Beyond 50 as well as our upcoming programs. I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you for joining us. This is the Beyond 50 radio program, and remember, live your day past halfway.